Well, hello, everyone. Glad to be here. So part of the theme this year is better energy together. And I've been asked to come up here today and talk about some very exciting work we've been doing on a better energy grid of the future. It's called the California 2030 Low Carbon Grid Study, and it has become the intellectual framework for a bold new approach to climate and energy policy in California. It has fundamentally changed the conversation and has laid the groundwork for massive new markets on the scale of 10 to 20 gigawatts of wind and solar in California and throughout the West. And the headline is that California can get to its statewide carbon reduction targets by investing in renewable energy. And here's the kicker. With today's technology, and this wasn't even true a couple of years ago, with today's technology, it is actually cheaper to build the renewable grid of the future than it is to double down on the fossil-based grid of the past. And I want that to sink in. What's right for climate is also what's right for the economy. And I mean, that sounds good, right? But it's contrary to conventional wisdom, which means unless you can back it up, it's just anecdote. Unless you can prove that we can actually get to reliability, that we can keep the lights on, that we can premise a system on intermittent power without quote-unquote over-generating or breaking the system, or worse, breaking the bank, until you can demonstrate all of that, it's just a nice story. And this study is evidence. This study was done by some of the best modelers in the country. It was scrutinized by peer review. It's been read by utilities and energy wonks and by policymakers, and it is being taken very seriously by some very smart, very prominent people. The immensely popular four-term Governor Jerry Brown cited this work as a key influence on his decision to aim for 50% renewables by the year 2030. That was just a few months ago, and today in state government, we already have 3 different bills vying to be the one that establishes some form of a 50% renewable energy standard, or RPS. In concert with California's ambitious carbon targets, this type of policy is reforging the future of energy markets in California and also throughout the West. When we set out, the goal of this initiative was to model a hypothetical future grid that would enable California to meet its carbon targets. We used open source modeling, conservative assumptions, and existing technology to try and answer the questions of, can we get to carbon? Can we do it reliably? And can we keep the costs down? But changing a system on that scale, making it 50% different than it used to be, is a big shift. And California is connected to half of the continent by transmission lines, which means to do something that big in California also affects the rest of the West. And that is a heavy lift to model. Even with the best science available, it's a homework assignment with at least a $500,000 price tag. But we at EDP Renewables believed in this, in the value of this project, and we believed in making it a reality. We were a founding member of the steering committee. I'm the outreach liaison. My director, Roby Roberts, is the chair of the steering committee. And to date, it's been funded and supported and governed and designed by over 30 different technology companies, ranging from every type of renewable energy to energy efficiency, to energy storage, to natural gas. In addition to that, we also had 2 grants from private energy foundations, and the second phase of modeling was funded entirely by the US Department of Energy. The modeling itself was done by the National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL, and that's a federal program that is the gold standard for this type of work. In addition to that, we did reliability analysis with GE and cost capital analysis with JBS Energy. And this is the most important part. We put together a technical review committee with every utility and system operator and state energy agency to check our work and to vet our inputs and assumptions and to make them better, and to verify that our results can actually be trusted, that our results actually mean something. And I want you to look up at that screen. That is a lot of very smart people that have had their hands in this. And that is a lot of groups that are not known for working together or even agreeing on anything. And that level of oversight is part of why the results have been so influential. Of course, it helps that the finding of the model was extremely compelling. We anticipated good answers to those questions on carbon reliability and cost, but the findings were better than we ever expected. They point to the need to modernize the grid and not just layer on some renewables here and there, but to flip the script so that the zero carbon resources are the system, and it's the carbon-based resources that get integrated. So now let me tell you a little bit of how it works. First, we had to figure out how much the grid would have to change if it was going to hit California's carbon targets. Then we had to figure out how the updated system would actually work and maintain reliability. And lastly, we added up all the savings in areas like fuel expense and compared them to the cost for the new investment. This is a chart here that represents California's electric sector greenhouse gas emissions, or GHG. These numbers, I want to tell you, are derived from government agency projections, and they take into account load growth, advancements in energy efficiency, a wide deployment of electric vehicles, and all of the generation that's already on the books. And we are committed through existing policies like a 33% RPS and cap and trade to 2020 to get some level of GHG reductions. The thing is, this is how far it gets you in 2030, and this is where the target is. California has a 2050 goal of GHG reductions that mirrors the Kyoto Protocol from the UN, which is essentially 80% below of 1990 levels by the year 2050. So this line represents the shortfall. And if we're going to be on track to 2050, we have to remove from the electric sector 40 million metric tons of CO2 by the year 2030. We're not going to get there with the existing policies and with the way that we run the system now. But in our models, we ran a series of sensitivities and scenarios, and we came up with a target case that landed here on the emissions chart with 100% reliability. And the cost to do this was on the downside of the margin of error. That means that it's essentially cost the same to do nothing and invest in the status quo as it does to spur a new energy economy and do carbon while you're at it. And this is with very conservative assumptions on things like the price of natural gas. In some cases, doing this portfolio actually ends up cheaper. And let me tell you a little bit about the portfolio. We plugged in a range of scenarios with a huge build-out of new clean energy projects across the West and across the spectrum of technologies, up to about 60 gigawatts in all. And that adds up to about $58 billion of new investments, which are effectively paid for on saving fuel expense and efficient operation of a modernized grid. You need efficiency to make it work. You also need regional coordination through things like the energy imbalance market to displace the need for natural gas as a source of flexibility. And I want to focus on this for a minute because this is one of the key findings and one of the big surprises. We sometimes hear this story that in order to do a lot of renewables, you need tons of gas on the system so you can ramp up quickly when the sun goes away or when the wind goes away. And the need for a flexible ramp is real, but it can be done without gas. In fact, you can meet almost all of your grid services with low carbon resources. The only reason we don't do that now is because the grid was built back in the 20th century and we didn't know how back then. But we do now. And the grid is aging and it needs upgrades and we have a choice to make about how we do it. And when you don't rely on gas exclusively for the flexible ramping, you can afford to turn it off when you're not using it. And that prevents inefficient, wasteful idling, which it turns out is one of the most effective and cost-effective ways of getting carbon reductions in the system. In this worldview, fossil fuel is treated like a precious, valuable commodity used efficiently and only when you absolutely need it, not just because you can, not just because you always have. The alternative is a portfolio approach. There is no silver bullet, but in aggregate, a series of low-carbon mitigation measures can overcome the reliability challenge without rampant curtailment and without higher system cost. Those measures include system diversity, regional coordination, using the best of each technology along with bulk storage and distributed batteries. It means upgrades to efficiency, rooftop solar demand-side measures, and most importantly, it means strategic, long-term thinking about grid upgrades and procurement and dispatch and management, pivoting at every juncture toward the least cost, lowest carbon option. And the prize is climate and a new energy economy. 10 gigawatts of wind, 50 more of other technologies, $58 billion of investments, hundreds of thousands of jobs, long-term stable energy prices, and making it possible for other sectors like transportation and buildings to decarbonize at scale, to electrify without increasing emissions. I just get so excited, I'm sorry. Friends, the 20th century grid premised on fossil fuel has been enormously successful. It has heralded in an unparalleled epoch of human innovation and security and a first world way of life. We have benefited tremendously, but it has come at the cost of climate. And we didn't know that when we built it, but we know that now. And thanks to that innovation, and thanks to projects like this, we also know that it is good for the economy to invest in a renewable grid of the future. We can modernize our grandparents' grid and get it ready for our grandchildren. We can wean ourselves off a fossil-based status quo and toward a 21st century grid premised on clean, renewable energy. That's the vision that's taking root in California. I'm proud to be a part of this project, which is truly showing us what we can do together for better energy. Thank you.